All right. Okay. So let's start.
Yep. So this is which JellyCast is this?
This is JellyCast number 4.
Okay. Are you sure?
Yes. Yeah, I checked it beforehand. It is. This is JellyCast 4.
Okay. Yeah. So thanks for listening. We've got a few things to talk about as far as the game and what we're planning to do and what's already been done, right?
Yeah. We have to do our intro. We have to say who we are.
Yeah. Well, we can. Anyways, go ahead. Intro yourself.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm Thomas Cashman. I'm the programmer on Alchemic Cutie, and with me is Sebastien Vacrix. Am I saying
Yeah,
that
you
right?
actually
I
did say it
always
right.
ever. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm the artist.
I should know. I should know by now.
Yeah. And your
Yeah.
and your last name
So
is Kushman.
Cushion.
Kushman, right?
you you'd actually be surprised how many people mess up my last name. I've had Kashmal, Kashmar. Um, yeah,
Hmm.
for such a simple name,
Yeah.
people seem to.
Okay. Well, so that's us. And the first thing we want to go over is the convention schedule. Uh, so far, we're not going to be going to Gamescom or um, PAX West as we originally intended. We are still looking at some other conventions to go to in the future, um, especially next year, since the deadlines for those are further out.
Yeah, hopefully, we'll be doing more conventions closer to launch.
Yeah.
um,
So, I guess it's kind of bad news, but
yeah,
that's sometimes things just don't work out, right? So you wanted to go over the transition that we've been having as far as developing the game, right?
yeah. So we finished out the alpha, and then we transitioned into full-on production of the game. And yeah, I guess there is some kind of adjustments in process and um, well, on the tech side as well, to how we develop the game. So I guess yeah, I just wanted to maybe talk about that a
Yeah. Well, please continue.
bit.
I'm interested to hear.
um, well, I mean, from the biggest thing on the tech side, I mean, a vertical slice is significantly different from like your final game
Yeah.
in terms of code. So a lot of stuff was already there in terms of like world streaming and stuff like that, since it's an open world game.
Mm.
But we did have to do a lot of optimizations in terms of like the graphics pipeline um, and then like how we load and save data and stuff like that, so that it would work more optimally, not just when we port to consoles, but also for like kind of lower end devices. We did have some laptop users who couldn't play the game because we were doing so in the alpha we were doing about, I think it was like 900 and something render flushes to the graphics card,
Mm.
whereas now in the current build we do about 50.
Oh,
So
well, that's a big difference.
yeah, so um, a lot of changes, and especially since we optimize now the jelly rendering, so we now use the shader to recolor the jellies rather than pre-generating all the different colors and shape
Hmm.
combinations. Is somebody? Hang on a minute. I think somebody's calling me. Yeah. So now we recolor the jellies using shaders instead of pre-generating all the color and shape
Hmm.
combinations, which significantly reduces the amount of textures that we have to load onto the graphics card
Yeah.
and texture swapping. So yeah, it's running a lot more optimally now.
Yeah, we also made some changes with the like the map textures as well. Kind of broke them up into categories so we're not having to like load every single one every map.
Yeah. Well, originally we were doing a lot of swapping between the different tile sets.
Hmm.
So So now, well, even now we kind of pack the smaller tile sets into a larger image and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of optimizations done on the kind of pipeline of how we handle textures and swapping,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is not something I was aware of, but I wasn't aware of like how bad
Mm-hmm.
you can end up doing things and what effect it has.
Okay.
um,
Yeah. And, is there anything as far as like data structures and things that would affect modding, for example?
well, the modding format has updated quite a bit to add in a lot more configuration options, especially in terms of like the spawn data and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then as well, the save data is now in a binary format so that it's kind of quicker to load since the world is quite large in terms of state that it needs to store
Mm-hmm.
and restore. So, yeah, a lot of stuff was done in the back end, which was kind of annoying for a few months because we'd be like working on a lot of stuff, but then if you actually run the game, it was still in the exact same state it was like months ago.
Yeah, it's like this game is so much better, but nothing has changed as far as the
Yeah,
content.
yeah. But luckily now, like, I mean, we've hired some interns and part-time workers now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so we have Augusto, Cueva, Stephen for the summer, and Taylor is working part-time on the level art.
Yeah.
So um, it's content is actually happening now. So
Mm-hmm.
the game actually changes week by week, which is good.
Yeah, there's so in the vertical slice we had about a like a 9 by 9, no, not 9 by 9, like 3 by 3 map area.
Yeah, yeah,
Now so that's like 9 maps, and now we have
mm,
about 200 maps. Is that something like that?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
which they're not all done at this point, but we've got our, let's say, the field, like the starting area is shaping up really nicely so far.
Yeah, so we planned out a lot of the islands, and it's sort of broken up into four sections. So we have the plains, which is actually, so even though it's a starting area and it's 1/4 of the total areas, it's actually around half of the total maps, if that makes sense.
Mm,
So it is about 100 maps.
yeah.
Um, and then you've got the forest, the springs, and the mountain.
Mm,
And you've done a lot of work on the tile sets for that, especially in the springs area, to make it kind of look a lot different because we had a lot of forests and grass everywhere,
yeah.
and it was like,
Yeah, everything was very green. So Taylor went in and uh, basically fixed up the spring area so it would not be identical to everything else.
yeah,
But it's still in early stages, so we still got a lot to do on that.
mm,
But as far as the art's concerned, it's definitely a different approach. When you're doing a vertical slice, you just need to have what's going to be there uh, in the playable build. And
mm,
now it's become more of a task to make all the art assets that are going to be used and reused going forward. So, like you're mentioning with the tile sets, those tile sets have to work for all the different areas that are in the game instead of just the the vertical slice demo area.
yeah. And it's also as well with characters and stuff, like we had Skeezer in the alpha, but he was just like one static sprite
Yeah,
facing forward.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think so was what was the turtle's name?
Gemma.
Yeah. So she also had just the one sprite. She didn't actually have like walking animations or other directions. So
Yeah,
um, yeah, that's actually what I'm doing now is working on those character animations and stuff so they can actually walk around. So we can give them schedules and quests and all that stuff. So
mm.
yeah.
Especially since now, like, since we finalized the story and characters,
Mm-hmm.
um, because we really,
Well, at least the overarching is it
yeah,
overarching or overarching?
I don't know
I don't
actually.
know. But anyways, the main plot is pretty much settled on at this point, um,
Mm,
with the help of guys over at Tailspinners.
mm,
Did a workshop with them; they were really helpful. So we have that planned out. We have all our characters decided on. So now it's left. So we have to write everything and implement all the quests and the scripts and debug it all and do lots of work.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Like in sort of we were kind of stuck, I guess, on the story.
Yeah.
Like we had ideas, but there was like gaps that we just couldn't fill.
Mm.
So Matt and Cash from Tailspinners really helped us work that out.
Mm.
um, yeah, and I was I was so relieved. I was just like, okay, we now know what way the story works.
Yeah.
um, and I think it's a good story. I think it's
Yeah. Should
going to be
be.
a nice,
Well,
wholesome
we'll see.
adventure.
I mean, neither of us have extensive writing credits, so hopefully it'll still work out. But I think
Yeah,
it's a
this was
fun story and it'll be interesting.
hmm,
Yeah.
yeah, it just as you said. Hopefully the writing doesn't end up like I will go to the shop now. Bye bye.
Yes. Hello, it's me, your brother.
Yeah.
Oh, hello, you, my brother. How are you today inside of our family home? Yeah. Um, yeah, but aside from that stuff, the writing, the graphics, the actual engine and things like that, we have been updating some of the gameplay as well.
Yeah, so we did fine tune the feeding of the jellies.
Yeah.
Um, like we had it mostly down in the alpha, but we really sat down and kind of got it right.
Yeah, it was pretty clunky.
Yeah, yeah. And as well with the flute and the alchemy, like same again in the alpha, it was mostly there, but we did need to add like a sort of progression system into it.
Yeah.
So now the flute works that you have a charge for it, and it's sort of like the Zelda heart meter in that like you can find things to increase the size of the meter,
Yeah.
and some of that will be tied to the story, but we won't give too much away on that. But the idea is that it recharges during the day, and you also can recharge it by going to sleep.
Yes. Yeah. That was probably, I think, one of the bigger. It seems like a small change, but it's actually pretty impactful.
Yeah,
Because we had the sleeping just so you could advance time before, but now it actually has a real purpose.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now the sleeping is still optional as we originally
Yeah.
planned.
Yeah. I mean, so your alchemy recharges anyways as you're playing in real time.
Mm.
But if you just want it all back, you just go back to sleep and it'll recharge faster.
Yeah.
And we did that partially because we want people to actually see all the different seasons and stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that'll help, kind of move along the timeline, so you can experience more of the game, rather than getting stuck in one season, playing for a few, so many hours and be like, oh, well, that was cool. We actually want them to see some of the other events and like how the island changes between as it goes throughout the year.
Yeah. And there was something I was going to say there. What was it?
Was it about sleeping, about the flute?
Yeah, it was about the sleeping. Nope, it's gone.
Okay. Cool. I'm trying to think, is there anything else related to the gameplay that, I mean, all the notebook is completely redone. That was one thing, by the way, moving from vertical slice to full development is considerations for things like Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
We basically had to redo all the UI.
Yeah.
So it's a lot nicer. It was it was a positive thing overall. It was just
because we've done like a quick screenshot test on the Switch just to make sure everything looks
Yeah.
okay before we actually do the porting.
Hmm.
And it was like, I cannot read any of the user interface.
Yeah, it was just way too small. So that's all fixed up. We're doing a lot of cool things with the notebook.
Yeah.
You mentioned that as far as it keeps track of the things that you've found, that you've used alchemy on, that you fed to jellies.
Yeah.
There's links between things in the notebook. So if you go to a page of an item, you can see where that item comes from. Like if it comes from a certain plant, you can click on that and it'll bring you to that plant's information page and so on.
Yeah.
Also going to have a world map, of course. You can't really have an open world game without some kind of map. We'll have the same kind of system for characters. So you can see information on your characters and view the quests. And what else? We haven't put it in yet, but we are planning on having a checklist for finding all the different shapes and colors of jellies. And we do have the Cutiepedia, which you can look into to read about different events or the different fiction about the world of the game.
Yeah, the Cutie is going to be fun. It's going to take a lot of writing.
Yeah, it is. But, I think, really the thing is that it'll be good to write the main story and quests and stuff, but having these little side things that you don't have to worry too much about, I think it'll be nice to be able to write those. And it might be cool to find guest writers for those kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Just to have, different actual authors, writing.
Yeah.
Like if you find a book about this series, it's actually written by a different person. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, the other thing I'm looking forward to as well is adding in the fast travel system, because we have some cool plans around that.
Yeah.
Which we'll maybe talk about in a later JellyCast.
Yeah, maybe.
And we've also been kind of expanding what you can do with the alchemy in terms of interacting with the world, which we have some stuff working already, but I think it'll be cooler to kind of show that in a blog post to see some cool gifts.
Yeah.
Yeah, so overall, yeah, a lot of progress has been made, and hopefully by the end of the summer we've got a good bit of content of the game kind of built out.
Yeah, and it's amazing what you can do when you're actually doing something full time.
Yeah, I know.
When you don't have to you don't have other responsibilities.
Yeah, so, especially from
shout out to Circle.
Yeah. Yeah, especially from I take from a mental load kind of point of view, if that makes sense. Because because when you're doing when you're not doing it full time and you're working your day job or whatever, you're like, okay, I'm going to go to work at this time, I'm going to do all of that, and then after work I need to go do my groceries, and then go, and then I'll spend 2 hours working on this task that I need to do for the game, and then whereas now it's it's kind of yeah, I don't know, it's just kind of frees up your headspace or something, I guess. That's okay, well, I'm going to be working on the game tomorrow all day, so it's not I don't have to plan things as much, I guess.
Right.
That you can actually just focus on actually planning the game.
Which we're doing,
especially
which we're doing almost every day. We have all these meetings, so
yeah, we do daily meetings, and but especially from not just planning the game, but also a iteration point of view. Because before the original, when we originally made the alchemy system, it took 2 months or so, and then we played it and we're we brought it to, which was it? We brought the game to
before Gamescom.
Yeah, it was the one in Berlin. I keep thinking Digital Dragons, but that's in Poland. Quo Vadis. And when we brought it there and people were playing it, it was yeah, players are not getting this alchemy system at all. That was like 2 months of work gone.
Yeah, well, it was. I think that was one of many things that we've changed since then. Because we realized, like, wow, this is just unneeded, uh, excuse me, needlessly complicated.
Yeah,
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 or it's just an opaque system that is not interesting to interact with.
yeah. Um, Whereas like now, like you go, okay, we'll make a change on that, and like, okay, it might take a day or two, but because you're doing it full time, that's okay. Versus doing it part time, it's like, okay, I'll spend next weekend on it, and then
Mm-hmm.
and then hopefully, or a few weekends on it, and then hopefully it turns out to be good.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, it can end up. Yeah, full time definitely helps you improve your process
Mm.
a lot.
Do you have any advice
Or
for people, by the way, about programming? I know you've been doing a lot of uh, work on like getting the game on Switch.
yeah, so okay, well, I'll just backtrack a bit on this one
Okay.
and say that originally when we started the project and we were like saying, okay, we're going to get a publisher, my thought process was like, okay, I'm working my full time job. I don't know how to use things like Unity or Unreal or anything like that,
Mm.
so I'm going to stick to what I know and use all the tools that I have that I'm familiar with, just so that we can make something.
Yeah.
So built everything in Java, and that got us our vertical slice, and we got the publishing deal with that. And my thought process is like, okay, I'm sure, you know, if we get a publisher that, we'll be able to do the port at a later stage.
Mm.
But a lot of publishers now want to do like simultaneous launches, which makes a lot of business sense if you think about it.
Yeah.
That you want to be making as much noise as possible when you launch,
Mm.
which I didn't foresee at the time. So now we were trying to get the game running on the Switch, and I kind of hoped I could use the IKVM cross compiler to compile it to C sharp and then compile that to the Switch.
Mm-hmm.
But um, that turned out to be like only half a compiler, and half of it was like generating code at runtime, which you can't really do when you have to compile everything ahead of time. So now, so the decision basically was, do we rewrite the whole game in C sharp, or do I write something that can cross compile all the existing work we have
Mm-hmm.
to C sharp? So the last 2 months or so, I've been basically writing this cross compiler, and the first like 6 weeks were pure torture. I could not figure out the bytecode. Or well, it wasn't the bytecode. The bytecode is fine because I bought like a book on that, but the figuring out how to like do all the type resolution, so that you're resolving all the right types ahead of time, and oh boy, it was just complete and utter hell.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm past that now, and a lot of progress has been made, and I hope in the next week or two it'll be up and running. And then that means we're working on a single code base for both, for all, not just the Switch, but for every port that we'll do
Mm-hmm.
in the future. And it means that we're in, and especially from like it means we're in a good state, especially from like a maintenance point of view, because, and I've heard it from a few of my friends who made releases using Unity, that they end up having to maintain multiple versions, even though it's all in Unity.
Mm-hmm.
But there's different fixes for different consoles, and they have like a different build for different platforms, which as a programmer and as a software engineer would drive me nuts, because I'd be like, why would I have to maintain like four different like the PC version, and then the
Mm-hmm.
you know PlayStation version, and the like, if I put a fix into one, it should just be in every single one, and I shouldn't have to be making platform specific fixes unless it's really necessarily required.
Mm-hmm.
Now for 3D games, it makes sense because 3D graphics and pipelines are way more complicated. But for 2D games, apart from like the odd shader that you do, it's not doing anything, you know, crazy advanced that you can't make it work with a single build system on every platform.
Mm-hmm.
So so I'm kind of hoping that long term it'll reduce our maintenance cost.
Yeah, great. So, do you have any suggestions? So, uh, from what little programming I've done, it seems like part of the challenge of solving something is finding out the solution somewhere.
Yeah.
So,
I,
where do you think people should go? Like, I mean, you've been trying to do research on something like, a compiler, which is way more complicated than some of the other things that people might want to look up for programming.
um well, so I guess um I mean, you can search a lot of stuff online.
Mm.
Um, a lot of times, though, documentation isn't great. I find if there is a specific book on it, I find books way more useful.
Mm.
But even with that, oftentimes there isn't books on the topics that you need.
Mm.
Or, and in many cases, I've done this where like the book says like, "Oh yeah, this is a thing about this," and then you buy it, and it's like one chapter which gives you a basic introduction of stuff you already know,
Uh-huh.
and it was completely useless, you know.
Mm. Did you mention that you had found like a research paper that you found useful for the compiler?
Oh yeah, yeah. So I was trying to figure out how to, yeah. So in Java, Java has like an operand stack um for managing like like operations as you're running a function. So I was trying to figure out a way to like reverse that so that we could generate, like I could use this generate a stack in C sharp, but I'd rather the code came out similar to what the Java code was originally. So I found online like a research paper because I know there's like Java D compilers. So obviously they've solved this somehow uh, in reversing the Java bytecode back to Java.
Mm.
So I found a research paper on these algorithms that you can use to like reverse that bytecode, and so I'm using those algorithms to do a similar approach for generating the Java bytecode to C sharp source code.
Okay.
But yeah, that is a very rare case. I mean, like, I think the majority of programmers don't have to go looking for research papers on things.
Yeah, but I thought I'd mention it because that's not something I had considered
Yeah.
ever. I was like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Like, I am, and I think it's kind of unfortunate that in Ireland, there's not really much of a game development scene.
Mm.
There's a lot of Unity development, but like, I mean, we don't have big games companies here.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no expert that I can go to and say, "Hey, have you ever come across this? Like, how did you solve it?" You know,
Mm.
and you know, so it's kind of unfortunate that the kind of state of the games industry here is kind of like that. There are people trying to change it, but it's a very uphill battle, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of annoying because like across the Irish Sea in the UK, they have a booming industry, and if I was living there, I'm sure I could easily find someone that I could help me solve these things. But oh well, such is life.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't really have any special advice as far as art. You just got to do a lot of practice.
Yeah, but you've been learning stuff, especially about uh, pixel sizes and stuff for consoles, and
Yeah, there was some resolution stuff that we had to go over, but I wouldn't say that was too complicated, really. It's just knowing your math tables,
yeah,
what resolutions there are out there. We did need to consider some of the more oddly shaped resolutions and how that would affect our, like for example, the notebook UI, because that's not really scalable because it's an actual notebook that appears on screen. So we just had to make sure it was within the boundaries of certain resolutions. Yeah.
Yeah, resolution handling is a pain in the ass, especially with all these like high DPI screens.
Yeah.
I got some bug reports and I still need to investigate them. Of like, oh yeah, so I've got like a 4K monitor, but I'm running it in like 1080p. mode,
Mm.
and it's just like, oh, why do graphics cards do this to me?
Yeah, well, and we also had a very strange issue with screen jitter.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, that was mainly actually due to our camera movement following the wrong. So in graphics programming, you have what your actual state is and then what your render state is.
mm.
And we were following, the camera was following the actual state and not the render state.
So maybe if I can rephrase that, when the
Yeah.
game is running, what it does is it's calculating the actual interaction between game objects and the game systems, and then after
Mm.
that, it would render the result onto the screen. Correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there could potentially be a difference between the actual numerical representation of an object and how it's represented on the screen, as far as, for example, its position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what can happen is you can end up in, especially in games programming, like depending on how you do your time steps,
Mm-hmm.
you can end up where you have multiple renders happening before your next update happens.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be a case that your render state is either, what was happening with us was that our render state was ending up ahead of the update state, and so we were getting this like jitter in the camera movement. So the player was fine on screen because it was the player being tracked, but the world around you would just flicker, and it was very weird.
Yeah, and it's something that it's one of those. I don't know if there's a particular name for it, but it was one of those bugs that kept popping back up.
Yeah,
So,
it was like it happened on certain PCs or monitors,
mhm,
and I think, and that's the problem with games programming. Like hardware is very different between different setups.
yeah,
Like I can have a 1080, a NVIDIA 1080 graphics card, but my monitor is refreshing at 50 hertz,
mhm.
and there's just all these variables in play. And the reality is, like, even if you have a 50 hertz monitor, it might actually fluctuate between 49 and 51. And
Yeah,
it's just all these, everything, yeah, just so many numbers in play and fluctuations that you
mhm.
have to accommodate for. Um, but anyway, we got it solved, so the camera's a lot smoother now.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, sorry, we went off on a bit of a detour there into games programming.
Yeah, that's fine. Maybe some people wanted a nap. You know.
Oh,
You lost me a little bit, but I think anybody who likes programming would probably get something out of that.
yeah.
I still enjoyed it. But in any case, is there anything else you wanted to go over? Because I think we covered just about everything we wanted to today.
Yeah, I think that's it. There's a few more things we'll share in the coming weeks in blog posts and stuff.
Yeah,
And
yeah. So do keep
I
an eye
say,
out for that. We're gonna be posting more stuff on the website as far as screenshots and video of things that we're actually working on,
yeah,
and other kind of things. We are working on something for Discord,
hmm
which we're not going to get into too much, but it's definitely on the way. We hope you
yep,
guys are going to really enjoy it. It is actually something interactive. That's what I'll say.
yeah, um, yeah. A lot of surprises on the way, and so make sure to join our Discord, follow us on Twitter,
Yep.
um, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook.
Yeah. So I mean, are they all Alchemic Cutie?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So and then Tom, what are your credentials? I guess I don't know what you call them. Your accounts.
Oh, my Twitter account, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's Tom_Cashman
Mm-hmm.
on Twitter. Then what's yours?
Mine is at Vacrex. So at
Because everybody knows how to spell that, right?
yeah, everybody knows how to spell that. I just wanted to have a unique thing. But anyways, at V as in Victor, AKERI, C as in Charlie, S. So at Vacrex. Yeah, it's if you know what you're looking for, it's not hard to find. But both of us should be followed by the main Alchemic Cutie account, I think.
Yeah, I think the description in the Alchemic Cutie account has our Twitter handle.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah.
I'm not hiding anywhere. So social media can find me probably. Okay, great. So thanks for listening, and that's the end of JellyCast number 4.
Yep. See you next time.
Yep. Bye bye.